In starting, can I first pay tribute to Paul Harriott, my friend and colleague in Twiddle, and from whom I have learnt my passion, I believe, for decent, affordable housing. Housing has been a growing crisis, which is now emerging more overtly as an issue of public need. At a recent housing rally, the problem was simply summed up by James Langstaff, Bishop of Rochester, who said, "The lack of housing which is sufficient, affordable and suitable affects communities across the country from villages to city centres." He added, "The impact is especially marked for those who are the poorest and most vulnerable in our society, but it extends to all sectors of the population." I think, you know, I don't often quote bishops in my speeches, but I think he's pretty much nailed that one. And this supply-demand imbalance for decent homes is manifesting in a variety of ways. There are the 20,000 families on the Council's housing waiting list, but it also shows in the inability of first-time buyers to be able to afford anything because all of the properties are being hoovered up by buy-to-let landlords, who in turn are pushing up rents to get a return on their investment. And it's reflected in poor quality housing having to be accepted by those at the bottom of the pile, with the Council's own housing strategy document acknowledging we now have landlords able to pick and choose tenants, with the consequent risk of degeneration further to Rachmanite practices if we don't get a grip on this problem. All of this stems from too few homes, and the answer therefore must be more homes across a range of tenures. But there can be no immediate simple fix. It will take time and a range of initiatives at national, regional and the local level. The Council's housing strategy is good at analysing the problems, and I would recommend that part of it at least as background reading. The problem comes with the Tory response to this crisis, which either doesn't understand the scale of the problem or simply doesn't care. We have too many people who are living in housing poverty, paying large proportions of their wages to private landlords, often for poor quality accommodation, with little security or ability to put down roots in their communities. The Tories brag about building 35 council houses, and we welcome those new homes, we do. But let's be under no illusion, at the current rate of build, it will take 1,000 years to house those currently on the housing list. So we need to build more council homes, with the Council seeking new powers from an incoming government to borrow to build, where we would have an asset on the balance sheet to offset the loan, let's call it a mortgage, and which would lead to a lower housing benefits bill for the government in the process. We also will work with developers to introduce a starting point for affordable homes on new housing developments. Currently, the Council has a 25% target of affordable homes on developments of more than 25 units. The Tories are looking to change that up to 25%, which shows their direction of travel. Up to 25% can mean zero. In contrast, we will be looking to have the starting point at 10 homes or more, and we'll explore with developers the potential for increasing that 25% target. But even if we get these additional new affordable homes, there will be far more people still living in private rented accommodation. So we want to work with those good landlords by setting up a social letting agency, not for profit, which would have the ability to guarantee rent to landlords, meaning no void costs, and provide use of the Council's effective housing management services, thereby offering the opportunity to achieve lower rents and longer tenancy agreements for the tenants, along with a ban on rip-off agency fees. This is a real potential win-win for landlords and tenants. We're also aware of poor landlords out there and plan to investigate the introduction of a landlord licensing scheme to get them to change for the better or root them out completely. When we talk about this massive demand for so few available properties, it is criminal that some homes are being left empty for long periods and allowed to go to rack and ruin. We've pushed on this area as empty homes don't only deny a family somewhere to live, but they also undermine local neighbourhoods. Other councils, such as Hastings, have done far more in this area, and we will be looking to replicate some of their work. The housing issue in Medway is now a large topic for most people. Either their circumstances are directly affected, or they're worried what their children will do when they grow and want to leave home. The Tory response is, well, there really isn't a Tory response. That's the problem. They haven't even got into hand-wringing mode yet, saying it's all too difficult and we can't do anything about it. They simply haven't connected with this problem, which means that they aren't connecting with local people who are rightly demanding answers and demanding them now. We're not saying here that we have all of the answers, but we have got some initiatives which will make a real difference. And crucially, we've got the drive to press on this for as long as it takes to work locally and to get a change in policy at a national level to turn this problem around. Turning to regeneration, we've highlighted a number of initiatives here. The first one I'd like to turn to is cycling, making it safer and more accessible. Now, I just want to stress at this point that it's not compulsory. We do recognise that Medway towns aren't exactly Norfolk, and there are a few hills around, and some of them are pretty vertical. But what we are saying is that where we can encourage people to cycle, it's good for them, a healthier lifestyle, it should be safe for them. And the more we can encourage, particularly youngsters, to be able to cycle to their local schools safely, that addresses the issues of congestion and parking that we're all aware of in our neighbourhoods, particularly at school opening and closing times. So you can immediately start to think how something that you might think, well, you ain't going to get me on a bike, actually turns into something that can make a real difference to people's local livelihoods. So that's one area. The next one is around our community wardens. Now, people tell us on the doorstep when we're doing surveys how much they value the community wardens as a link that they can go to address minor low-level environmental issues. The Tory response to this is to cut them. So in the latest budget, we've seen them reducing them to we haven't even got one for each ward now. And we're saying actually these are crucial links, particularly at a time when a council is under stress. People have got to have an easy way to be able to make contact with people on the ground who can see the problems, whether it's fly tipping or dog fouling or inconsiderate parking, all of those issues. It's about trying to find not necessarily an enforcement approach, but actually a communication link between those who are transgressing and those who are being affected by those problems, with the ability to escalate that if necessary. So again, absolutely the reason that we're saying that it's important that this should be prioritised. And then the third issue I want to address, which I think is a key issue, is the state of our roads. Public satisfaction with the state of our roads hovers around the 50% mark. So, I would say in some areas, Tories, not least because they've got some extra funding, things like waste collection, even though it's unaffordable in the long term, it's getting satisfaction rates up, in the region of the 90% and a good service being provided. Roads, we all know, they are falling apart. It's not just me saying that. The council's own officers are saying, acknowledging that they are getting worse by 1% per year, with the potential that if we don't do something about it soon, there will be an exponential drop-off in their road condition with a corresponding increase in the cost to fix the problem. The Tory response to this is, you think our roads are bad, you should go to ... wherever you want to say. Well, I do think our roads are bad, but I also think that I'm elected to do something about it rather than to simply say, well, our problem isn't as bad as somebody else's. The public say that this is important, I say that this is important, and that's why we think we should be doing something about it. And they had a real opportunity, actually. Vince earlier mentioned the Rochester Airport. And what the Tories were crowing about recently was that they'd managed to get the government to pick up the tab for that instead of the local taxpayers. Seemed not to recognise it's still public money funding this. But the crucial point about that was that instead of that money, that £4 million that they got the government to spend, they're going to have it spending on Rochester Airport, they could have had it upgrading Chatham and Strood stations. So instead, what do we find in the local budget, in the council budget meeting? Actually, they're now spending a large slug of that £4 million they've otherwise saved, giving it to Railtrack to upgrade Chatham and Strood stations. So we have the situation that if you had three things that you could achieve, which is repairing the roads, upgrading the stations, and Rochester Airport, we would say, let's do 1 and 2. Let's do the roads, let's do the stations, let's not do the Rochester Airport. Unfortunately, the Tory wish list was exactly the other way around, and so they have prioritised the airport, and they've got that. They're now spending the limited funds on the stations, which we're not criticising that money, it should have been done, but actually it shouldn't have been at the expense of our roads.